Guys, I've got some bad news. I'm sorry I have to tell you like this. But you know happy endings? She died. 2019 will be remembered as the year that critics and ivory-nosed writers went at her with a pickaxe and a knife and a 22 and an alligator on a chain, and they had their way with her, and then they left her on the side of the road to rot. Can we get a moment of silence for happy endings, please? Good news, everyone. I just got off the phone with the police. Writing snobs have not murdered the happy ending. However, they did try. And it's officially summer over there at AWP, the Association for Writers and Writing Programs, which means there's a new issue of the Writers Chronicle, their personal magazine. Which means a new issue of the Writers Chronicle has come out, and the cover story couldn't be a more pretentious, pessimistic piece of trash if it tried. No, that is not a challenge. The cover story for this issue is called Has the Happy Ending Fallen Out of Style? And it tries to make the argument that the happy ending isn't something that people want anymore. We're a much more realistic, sad society nowadays.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
When we're reading happy endings in books, we really just don't believe it, and it has no place in good literature. Goodson argues that we should be aiming for a more realistic, maybe there's hope, but probably not kind of ending. And she even goes so far as to say 19th century romance that ends in marriage is not a very realistic novel. And she might want to take a look at history for that one. On the first page of the essay, she says, happiness has long been a subject of controversy in Anglo-American literature. Thomas Edison, laboring in 1776 over a draft of the Declaration of Independence, listed it as one of only 3 essential and undeniable human rights, ordered from most concrete, life, to least concrete, happiness. This is the worst possible way that I could think of you starting out your essay. And what do I mean here? It's by misquoting the Declaration of Independence. Look, the Declaration of Independence does not state that happiness is an inalienable right. It says that the pursuit of happiness is an inalienable right. The pursuit of happiness means that you have the ability within yourself to try and make yourself happy. But you can't promise yourself happiness. You can't be sure that whatever you do will make you happy, and if you'll even be able to achieve whatever you try to do. But good luck. She goes on to say, what constitutes a happy ending? Is it the same thing as a good ending? Obviously, the answer is no. A good ending is an ending that makes sense with the rest of the story. I think all of us could look at any story, television, book, movie, whatever, and if the ending doesn't make sense, then it's a bad ending. She also brings up the debate over an open versus a closed ending. A closed ending is when stuff is, cleaned up nice and tidy. Most, if not all of the loose ends are picked up, and it's over. An open ending is an ending where some of the threads are left loose, and usually this happens a lot more if people are planning a sequel or like a sequel. You see it a lot in horror movies, especially because they like to have that beastie come back, because it also gives a chance to write a sequel. I think presently I have more of a bias against open endings because I'm sick of sequels. And right now the open ending feels less genuine and more like, well, let's try this thing, and if it works, we'll make a second one and then a third one until the money dries up. She states, humans' lives are continuums, some critics argue, and fiction that provides full closure is therefore artificial. Can we just take a moment to recognize the stupidity in fiction is artificial?
Why are we still here?
Yeah. And I've heard this argument before, and it especially came up when I was reading that essay about horror from the guy that wrote A House Full of Ghosts. I'll link that in the description below if you want to read it. And he argued that he didn't like horror, or was conservative for, if the ending was concrete. Because lives continue. But what none of the people who argue this take into consideration is that we're reading this story because it picks up for a certain subject. Like, we're looking into this person's life right now to see the specific thing that's happening. So we all kind of assume that if this character still exists, then their life is still going on, but we don't need to see the story go past the climax of the story. You don't ever see these people arguing that, oh no, why are we beginning at this part of their life because their life is a continuum? We need to start at their childhood and their birth and blah, 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 and then build up to this moment. Because the story is not about before or after that moment. The story is specifically about that moment and something changing in their life. However, they will always argue that, no. You can't do a closed ending because lives go on after people get married. Well, no, duh. Mary C. Ward, on the subject of happy endings, said there exists a rift between a lay reading public and critics of literature. Publishers and novelists were keenly aware that the reading public wanted endings which provided the illusion of ongoing happiness, in which good triumphs over evil. She goes on to criticize Shakespeare. Oh yes, Shakespeare. Because his endings in his comedies are unrealistic, they're too happy, they clean up too fast, completely neglecting the fact that he was writing his comedies for entertainment purposes, and his comedies were just meant to be fun. So, he was doing it to make money at the time. Do you think that he was like, oh, in a couple hundred years people are going to be looking at my stuff and calling it great? Probably not. He was just writing plays to sell to the Queen, as far as I know. And she goes, at the close of those plays, our feeling is neither of simple joy nor pain. We are excited, fascinated, perplexed, for the issue raised precludes a completely satisfactory outcome, even when the complications are outwardly adjusted in the fifth act. So she's just mad that once you get to the end of Shakespeare plays, you're usually satisfied, even if everything just got cleaned up in the final act. Margaret Atwood criticized sentimentality in endings by saying, you'll have to face it, the endings are the same however you slice it. Don't be deluded by any other findings, they're all fake, either deliberately fake with malicious intent to deceive, or just motivated by excessive optimism, if not by downright sentimentality. The only authentic ending is the one provided here. John and Mary die, John and Mary die, John and Mary die. So what I took away from this is that Atwood just, it doesn't matter what's in a story. The only actual ending to a story is everybody dies. So we could look at The Lord of the Rings and see the huge triumph that the team of heroes made, but the ending is not the real ending because the real ending is just that everybody dies. What a great way to look at everything. If the real ending to every story is that everybody dies, then I would argue we don't need to write that ending in there. Everybody knows that's the ultimate ending for every human being. So, and the stupid thing about this assertion also means that it devalues the deaths for characters who sacrifice themselves. If we look at World War II, okay, and the ending in real life is we defeated the Nazis, we defeated Hitler, and people rejoice. Well, if the true ending is just everybody dies, then the sacrifices made don't matter because everybody dies. Eventually, everybody dies. How sad is that? How monotonous is that? Why would you want to reduce everything to and everybody dies? And here is one of the big reasons that they have problems with happy endings. Novelist Heather Sherfedden joins the critical chorus, warning of the destructive aspects of happy endings. She, like Atwood, says that such endings create unrealistic expectations. They diminish the reader's interactions with the story, downgrading the experience from engaging to simply entertaining, instead of giving us the foundation for coping with difficult real-life problems. Happy endings falsely solve them in our own imagined worlds. They deepen our sense of discontent with real life and build false expectations. In summary, she says the problem with happy endings is it doesn't tell you how to cope with the real world, and it makes people think that they too can have a happy ending. How depressing is this woman? At this point, I'm kind of like, I want to go learn about her life. Is she a divorcee, perhaps? She uses simply entertaining like it's some kind of bad thing that a book or story might be entertaining. Walker Percy, who I also have no idea who he is, enters the conversation to also argue against the happy ending. Well, he doesn't just argue against the happy ending, he actually actively advocates for unhappy endings. He says the modern humans He says, modern humans are alienated, and as such readily identify with and find solace in reading about fictional characters who are also alienated. The reading commuter rejoices in the speakability of his alienation, and in the new triple alliance of himself, the alienated character, and the author. So his argument is people are miserable in real life, so write miserable characters so that the miserable people that exist in real life will then find friendship with you, the author, who obviously is also miserable, and the character who is also miserable. Anecdotal, when I'm feeling upset, I like to watch something uplifting or funny or playful. What do you like to watch when you're upset? Fortunately, further down the page, Mr. Percy is able to set us straight. He says the phrase fairy tale ending is synonymous with blissful marriage, joyful reunions, and successful adventures to such an extent that some educators denounce fairy tales as morally dangerous with wish fulfillment narratives, whilst feminists decry the way that they reinforce patriarchal stereotypes about how only love and marriage can satisfy a woman. It's true, though. Only love and marriage can satisfy a woman. That's why feminists are always screeching. But do these people denouncing fairy tales for having a happy ending even know what fairy tales are for? Fairy tales, in my understanding, have always been about teaching a lesson. They've been stories that are passed down from generation to generation to teach the children of the city or the neighborhood or the village a lesson. So they're going to have a happy ending if you behave, and they're going to have a bad ending if you don't behave, because it teaches a kid something. It's like a parable. Fortunately, against all the negativity, you have John Gardner saying that art instructs. So instead of writing sad things, because everybody in the world is sad, we should write truth, goodness, and beauty. They're fundamental concerns of art. The goals for the human condition here in this world, a conceptual abstraction of our actual experience of moments of good in the human life. It is the essential subject of all literature, and nihilistic literature perniciously denies it. Ideals expressed in art can affect the behavior in the world. Leo Tolstoy said the task for art to accomplish is to make the feelings of brotherhood and love of one's neighbor the customary feeling and the instinct of all men. So I can agree with these ideas because he's getting at, if you want a happier world, write happy stories. If you want sad worlds, then write sad stories, because people will follow along with that. So if we're looking at why are people more nihilistic now, well, you're trying to erase the happy endings. You're saying there are no happy endings, so no, I'm never going to write a happy ending. Funny enough, the other day somebody was posting on Twitter in the writers community tag and asked if a romance novel has to have a happy ending. And, spoiler alert, yes it does. What I think most bothered me about that essay is the fact that they are miserable people who want to make everybody else miserable as well. They say, I don't have a happy ending, I don't believe in happy endings, I probably have a hard time dealing with other people, maybe I'm divorced, and so I just want to write sad stories, and you should write sad stories too. Problem is, a lot of people have hope. A lot of people want a happy ending. I like to call AWP magazines the craft books on what not to do. So hear me out, I'm probably going to make some people mad here. But AWP, the conference, is like the anti-prom because they weren't cool enough to get to the prom. Most of the people there, I'm not saying all of the people there, but most of the people there are published through indie publishers that publish weird stuff and SJW stuff, and also school papers, school reviews, school literary magazines. So they're all publishing this leftist stuff. But none of them are really mainstream. And none of them ever will be, because they're pretentious and they write things that their critic friends like, but the general public doesn't like. And they kick you out if you don't write that pretentious stuff. Here they're saying, don't write happy endings. They're passé, they're meh, we're out of that because everybody is miserable. However, if you polled people, I bet they say they like a happy ending if that's where the story leads. I bet most people say they want an ending that makes sense. Look at Game of Thrones. People wanted a different ending with queens at the end. I don't watch Game of Thrones, so I'm grasping at what little knowledge I do have. But I assume it would have been a happy ending if Dany hadn't murdered everybody. I assume it would have been as happy an ending as a series like Game of Thrones could have if Dany didn't murder people. I know my friend watches Game of Thrones and had been watching and saying that Dany was having kind of a redemption thing going on, and a redemption arc is a hopeful arc. But they steered clear of the happy ending because of people like this that say it's passé. Because they're listening to the critics and not the story. And if you listen to the story, you'll usually have many fewer problems than if you're trying to just take information, to take the shortcuts anywhere. Do listen to the trope. Do listen to the craft. Don't listen to the fringe weirdos that say this is more artistic. Maybe you'll sell 10 copies. Be true to your story, true to your character choices, true to the ending, whether it's sad, happy, or somewhere in between. And you'll always end up with a better product. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. All you need to know is endings are